I'm going to be presenting a 40-page fever of a paper for you called Wound Writing Through Communicative Rekinning and Imagination. So what is it I'm doing here? I want to make sure that you have the path of discussion clear because this is what you're ultimately going to take away, which will later be problematized towards the end of my talk. But in the first section, as mimicking the paper, we're going to talk about connections between wellness and kinship and how these are intimately connected. And then I'm going to bring in my own novel account of hermeneutic illness, translational or interpretive illness that brings about rupture and woundage. From there, in the second part of my presentation, we'll discuss the possibility of rekinning and what rekinning actually entails and how to have a process of rekinning, we actually are going to need to engage in knowledges of imagination. So, without further ado. Okay, so connections between wellness and kinship. In this paper, I'm pulling from multiple indigenous authors, such as Brian Burkhart, Leanne Simpson, and I'm trying to take the concept of place thought and weave it into two separate accounts of holistic kinship and extended wellness. And the general idea here is that wellness is the kind of thing that is connected to kinship because kinship brings us in relation. It helps us identify agents. So it's the practice of looking into the world, both human, non-human, land, and non-human agent, and saying, you are someone who is helping me co-create the world. And wellness is the success of that co-creation. So I know there's this temptation to collapse them, but really we need to think of kinship as the starting point where I'm saying, I see you as an agent, I see you as someone who I can create with, and wellness then is the success of collaboration. It's how well you're actually communicating with these non-human agents and the land. Now you're seeing where I'm trying to tease something out here. This is all about communication. I can't say that I am in a relationship with you if I'm not able to talk with you or understand you. And this is really critical because how we interpret and translate the world is how we come into kinship relationship with it. And this is also how we find our wellness, by the success of this interpretation and this communication, which is where the scary stuff comes in, hermeneutic illness. And I know hermeneutics, it's a big, bad, scary word, but really it is translation and interpretation. This is what I'm interested in teasing out. And the definition I provide in the paper is that hermeneutic illness is a malignant state induced by dominating powers which limits the capacity to interpret and communicate interpretations of the world. Why does this matter? What am I saying? What I'm saying is that hermeneutic illness is an intentional measure deployed by colonial systems to enforce their norms of being and knowing. It separates us from the potential of wellness, from the potential of kinship, because it tells us that we're unable to interpret our relationships with non-human animals and the land in a way that is extremely violent, that limits our agency as well as the agency of non-human beings. And I'm taking up Christy Dodson's mantle here with epistemic violence, but I'm saying it goes beyond a mere individual wounding or slighting. It is something that is transmissible through generations. It is something that is perpetuated through multiple systems and from those who are most intimately near us, which is why I take up this disease model. And also on the idea of disease, it maps to the body. When we are no longer able to communicate with land and non-human animal, what we're saying is that we're no longer able to understand them and we can use them as exploitative resources or a mere means, which has physiological and psychological implications. Now, what can we do about this? What can we do about our inability to translate or interpret the world and how it has limited our interaction with our non-human kin and non-human agents? And so I want to argue that we can rekin. And we can do this through a process. I'm really big on processes. I think most things are. But an ongoing process of addressing trauma, of critical memory, and abandoning hopes of return. So what am I saying in this? How does this bring us into new interpretive frameworks? How does this combat our removal from relationship? Well, first and foremost, addressing trauma is locating rupture. Where have we now been unable to interpret and or translate? Why is it that I am so sure that the land can't speak to me? So when I'm thinking of people like those in the Incan community who believe that there are earth beings, why is this an absurdity? Why is this knowledge unable for me to translate into my episteme? From there, we go into critical memory. So it's not just that we're locating rupture and attempting to address it, but we have to remember the body, and the body in relation with land. And so I'm thinking of Lucia Stavig, I'm thinking of Diane Million when I'm talking about remembering, but I'm also thinking about Saidiya Hartman and the idea of rememory as allowing loss. So as we put ourselves back together, there will be a loss, which brings me to abandoning return. We are in a new world in some ways, and so when we fetishize and take ourselves to the past that is no longer existent, we actually limit how far we can get in processes of rekenning. So we have to refuse this romanticization and reclaim language, if not make new language, to bring us back into relationship and interpretive frameworks for the world that is. Now, this is a tall order, and I think when we're talking about the ability to make new language, we have to go to imagination. We have to go to knowledges of imagination, which is to say knowledges that are able to pry us from dominant ways of knowing and into alternate interpretive frameworks. And so I have multiple knowledges of interpretation in this paper, but the two I'm going to highlight for you today are narrative and dream, specifically shared dreaming. So how is narrative a knowledge of imagination? Well, it helps us sort our story. It helps take our reality as it is and fill in the gaps, which also goes to remembering, which also goes to addressing trauma. We make sense of the materiality around us through narrative, so as a means of story sorting. But dreaming takes it a step further. Dreaming projects us outside of our immediate conditions and says, yes, there is this material reality where I am trapped, where I am dispossessed, where I've been unable to interpret myself. But perhaps I can send my body into this alternate reality and make it so. And this is, of course, a tall order. This is by no means something that is easily achievable. But I want to share with you one of the poems that also breaks up this paper, which engages in this alternative framework of knowing, of interpreting. And it is that dreaming is the tender knife we use to cut the ropes of doubt. Stories draped across our shoulders, wielding a mountain's reciprocal vision, possibility grows. And in this presentation, I want us to just get to the possibility that there is another world that has been kept from us because we are unable to interpret it, unable to translate it, and this has made us ill. This has limited who we are as agents. And I want to end, of course, on limitations. I am a philosopher. There's always a limitation someone wants to talk about for us. But really, I want you to think about these rather than me answering them, which is who do we consider positioned to reken? What are the limits? Notice I have not said whiteness. I have not said blackness. This is all of us. And importantly, how do we avoid the threat of thinking that imagination doesn't change our material conditions? Because truly, possibility does. Many thanks. I'm done.